Today we will be looking at one particular thing. If you were ever a user of messaging service WhatsApp on the 30th of March, you may have noticed that your app suddenly upgraded and now you have the option of using WhatsApp to make voice calls. This is an example of an over-the-top player, a company that uses the existing infrastructure of telecommunications network to run their own services. In studio to discuss the rise of these OTT services is Brian Timperley, the Managing Director of Telecommunications Networks. Brian, thank you so much. OTT.
Yes.
What is that?
So over-the-top services layer themselves on top of existing data or internet connections and then provide voice and video and messaging services to consumers. So it's typically, a good example is a WhatsApp or a Skype or a Facebook Messenger, those type of services. And originally the first type of over-the-top service was actually email.
So what's the cost to this?
You know, the costs, it's one of the biggest benefits of it. The costs are extremely low, in some cases even totally free. So effectively, you'll normally not pay for the application itself, and the application providers won't charge you for using it. You'll be able to WhatsApp message and use Facebook Messenger without cost. The only cost that typically comes in is on the data side. So you are consuming data rather than using a traditional network. The costs tend to be far lower on the data network than making a traditional call though. And when I say lower, anywhere between a quarter of the cost to 1/20th of the cost using the data network versus the voice network.
Well, there are a couple of these. You've got Skype, WhatsApp, Viber. How does a person make a choice on which ones to use and which one's the best one?
Yeah, you know, choice is typically up to the individual, so it's to your preference. But there's a couple of things you want to look at when you're choosing it. Okay. Your reach is one of the biggest areas. So WhatsApp, as an example, has got over 800 million subscribers worldwide, which typically means that anyone you want to get a hold of who has a smartphone or a feature phone, you're able to call or message on the service. Then ease of use, so you know, a system that allows you to hop between calls and messaging and maybe video calls, and a lot of the over-the-top services are allowing that. And then probably finally the functionality. So some of these providers, Snapchat as an example, offer you services where your message is only available for a short space of time and then is deleted. And that obviously is a benefit for people who are concerned about their messages being kept and kind of in history and used against them at any given time. So there's a lot of different functionality, but typically reach is one of the most important ones, which is why WhatsApp is so popular.
Just a side note out of this, do you find that different demographics use different types of apps? I said I'm quite technologically challenged. I recently just got onto WhatsApp like a year ago. People have been there forever. Sure. But are you finding that different demographics or different age groups are using different types of applications? You
know, I typically, from my experience, find that it's pretty widespread. So, you know, the applications itself, it's one of the powerful aspects of over-the-top services is that, you know, technology that is built and innovation that's created in the world can impact any other part of the world almost instantaneously. So technology that's typically developed overseas in the United States hasn't always had a direct and immediate impact on places like South Africa and Africa, but over-the-top services certainly do. So it tends to not be, you know, it's open to everyone, and there doesn't seem to be a specific demographic that goes for it, but it is limited to certainly users with feature phones right up until smartphones.
Okay, so how does this work for you, for Telecommunications Networks? How do you make use of these applications?
You know, Telecommunications Networks is a provider of the infrastructure, the internet and the services for our customers, but it's really business focused. So over-the-top services, a lot of our customers consume it over the network and the internet and the services that we provide to them. And we have our own over-the-top services that we provide to them and cloud services, so the likes of email and voice over IP, and then obviously you know, the likes of cloud services and applications. So we really provide the infrastructure that businesses consume over the top and cloud services over. And you know, we're very much embracing over-the-top technology. We know that it's going to have a huge impact, in particular for the consumer space, but ultimately could start stretching into the business space as well.
What is the biggest challenge that you're facing with this over-the-top technology? I mean, just this is fairly new.
Yeah.
So tell us about it.
You know, I'd say the challenges that are faced is that a lot of the revenue that is generated at the moment from traditional telephony, so from cellular networks and from telecom landlines, a lot of that is potentially under threat, because if consumers have the ability to, at a dramatically lower cost or totally free, communicate with each other across these over-the-top platforms, it's definitely going to have an impact on the networks. Having said that, it's not like it will bring the networks to their knees or anything like that. It's more of a disruptor. What it will do is it will have an impact in terms of cellular to cellular calls, people communicating with their friends, but it certainly won't impact the likes of businesses who have call centers and need to make calls to landlines. That still relies on the traditional telephony of cellular communications and physical landlines as well.
You say this is a disruptor, so it's a disruptor in the South African markets. I would assume that it's being used elsewhere on the globe. Were you following a suit from what you've seen being done globally? Yeah,
I think one of the biggest impacts of over-the-top services will actually be that the networks will need to make some kind of change that's going to benefit the consumer. So instead of charging, typically what is seen to be very expensive rates for calls and big contracts, the costs will come down to a nominal fee, and then you get unlimited calls and unlimited data. Around the world, that has been one of the biggest impacts of over-the-top services in big competitive environments, and I see South Africa and Africa following the same trends ultimately.
Brian, thank you so much for educating us on OTT. Now I have an idea of what it is. Thanks to Brian Timpele. He's the Managing Director of Torito Network.